Hi everyone, my name is Angelica Renaud from the MathMagician Services, and today we're going to be discussing how to onboard a new client. So you might have seen my last video where I talked about how to do a proper consultation, and if your client ended up saying yes and they want to work with you, this is how you would onboard them to work with you in your bookkeeping company. So I'm going to share a little bit about how to onboard someone that already has a bookkeeping software such as QuickBooks, and also some that may or may not already have some kind of bookkeeping software set up. But first we're going to touch a little bit on if they do have a software. So first things first, as soon as they say yes, I usually let them know what I expect and how things go moving forward. And one of those is I will send them a bookkeeping agreement. This kind of just outlines some of the service agreements that we talk about, any settlements or disputes, the billing policy, how forms and things should be kept. It's just a legal agreement that shows that they understand what I'm talking about. I sign it as well. And then there's further instruction on there of how to continue with the onboarding process. So once they have signed this agreement, then I usually will also, along with that, send a credit card authorization form and a user login form. And the recurring credit card authorization form is what I keep on file and use to bill my clients monthly. That way I don't have to wait for them to bill me. I make it very clear to my clients that I will just automatically take that money out of their account until we're no longer working together, because I have waited for services to be done and payment, and I've gotten screwed over in the past. So I pretty much force that anytime that I get a new client. And then the user login form is similar in the fact that I hate waiting for people to send me their bank statements because they usually get a month or two behind. So I just have them either give me their actual user login information for their banks, or I will have them set up a specific user and password name for me to have access into their bank accounts, their tax filing, sales tax filing account, any other accounts that I may need to access to get my job done. And so I usually will require that of them as well. So also listed in my agreement at the very bottom is how to gain access, or how to allow me to have access into their QuickBooks account. And usually the way you do this is by clicking on Manage Users, select Accounting Users, Invite, and then they put in my email address. It's usually that simple. But once I have access into their QuickBooks, I like to go over a few things and just kind of do a quick audit / overview to make sure everything is how it's supposed to be. Majority of the time when I get a new client, there's a little bit of cleanup involved, but sometimes even when there's not, I still like to tell them, hey, why don't you go ahead and give me access? I'll look it over and see if there's anything in particular that needs to be addressed. Because they may have had a bookkeeper before, or they may think that things are perfectly fine. But as I review it and go through it, I may come across things that I feel like need to be fixed, and I obviously need to be compensated for that extra time that I'm doing that. So when I am doing this form of review, I usually like to look at several different spots within their books, and I'll go over this in more detail in a actual cleanup video that I have coming up. But usually this is going to be in the form of looking at uncategorized transactions. So I'll usually go in the chart of accounts, look at uncategorized income, and look at uncategorized expenses, and see if there's anything listed in those. And if there are, they need to be addressed and categorized properly. That way they're not just hanging out in the void, and there's no confusion whenever they go to their tax accountant for tax time. The second thing that I really like to look at is reconciliations. First off, to see if anything has been reconciled. And then secondly, I like to look in the reconciliation history. I literally go back to the very beginning of time when they opened their QuickBooks and see if there's any reconciliation discrepancies. There have been a few times that I thought that everything was okay, but 2 years prior, the reconciliations looked fine. And then 2 years prior to that, there's a reconciliation discrepancy that happened at one point that is throwing off the reconciliations moving forward. So I usually like to look at that history, see if there's any discrepancies, and then try to fix them or let my client know. That way I can go ahead and fix them. I also like to look at the balance sheet and make sure that the balance sheet amounts for the credit cards, the checking account, the loans, everything else actually match what's on the statement for that period of time. That's basically what a balance sheet is for, is making sure that that information is accurate and showing your assets and your liabilities. And so we want to make sure there's the most accurate depiction of that. And so I will usually get a bank statement and verify it against the balance sheet to make sure that all the numbers are correct. And if not, then there's obviously something hanging around in the chart of accounts for that specific account that can throw off the amounts for that balance sheet. Another thing I like to address and look into are the accounts receivable and the accounts payable. I like to see if there are any overdue invoices or bills, and if there are, how far back do they go? And then along with this, I like to look in the undeposited funds section. This can get very messy. A lot of people, especially a lot of clients that try to take on their own stuff, don't typically understand how undeposited funds work, and they can make quite a mess of it. And so usually the undeposited funds is where payments are sitting for invoices, but that just haven't been deposited yet. And so usually I like to see if the items sitting in undeposited funds could possibly match up with some of the invoices that are sitting in accounts receivable. And finally, I like to make sure that if they told me that there's any loans, that I make sure that all loans have been entered for any vehicles, other assets or liabilities. I like to make sure that those items have been listed, and pretty much if they haven't been, and even if they have, I like to make sure that I get a record of what the opening balance would have been, like from the moment that they purchased that specific item, to make sure that the information logged for that is actually correct. And then finally, pretty much to get started on just being able to do my regular bookkeeping tasks, I like to go through the transactions, and the search bar in QuickBooks is super beneficial. That way, if there are any transactions you're unsure of, usually you can search for them and find out what the previous one was listed as. But if that's not an option, I also like to write down certain transactions, make sure that if I have any questions that I'm writing them down, that way I can ask the client. And I always let the client know during their onboarding process, like, don't feel like you're out of the water yet. I'm going to need your help at least for a little bit to get all this information in order. So please don't just go off the face of the earth, because there are going to be probably other login information that I need from you. There's probably going to be other transactions or certain questions that I have for you about how you'd like things done. So I usually try to tell them that I will still need their cooperation in helping, but that's just for a brief time until I can get everything under control and used to how they get things going. Usually takes a little bit, about a few weeks to a month, for me to get fully acquainted with how like the patterns are of my bookkeeping clients. But if there are certain transactions that I'm not familiar with, I also have a spreadsheet that I like to put these in, and I will show what that spreadsheet looks like here. Now, whenever I have questions about certain transactions, I'll go through and make a spreadsheet just like this. I'll put, this will be like their bank account, so whichever one that is, like the one ending in 1234, the date, the amount, what it's for, and then I have this drop down menu here that literally matches the chart of accounts in QuickBooks. That way they can kind of choose between each of these things of which one they feel like most closely matches to what that actually is for. And then this person did property management at the time, and so I actually had all their properties listed in here. That way they could choose between which property it was. That way I could record it properly in QuickBooks for them. But I'll usually be able to share that as a link with them, and then they can kind of collaborate with me and they can choose that. But this is a really easy way to be able to get your clients involved and have them practically categorize the transaction for you without having to do it through QuickBooks. And then beyond all the rest of this, I like to make sure that any vendor and customer information that they have has been entered into QuickBooks, and if not, then I will import it in. So let's go ahead and talk about if they don't have a bookkeeping software. Pretty much I do the same first steps of having them sign the agreement, having them sign the recurring credit card transaction form, the user login form. The only thing is helping them get a QuickBooks subscription set up. Now, you may have talked about this already when you had your consultation, but this is where this QuickBooks checklist comes in handy, and I'm going to go ahead and go through that, guys, with you right now. Okay, so this actually comes with QuickBooks whenever you sign up with the ProAdvisor program. These are one of the first things that you get when you sign up. And this is really nice because it has these tabs here, and I'll talk about those a little more in depth. But this already goes over, we've already talked with the client, got them to sign a contract. Now we're going to get their client data and documents. And this little tab here for client information is really nice because this kind of goes into more detail about the company profile. You can get their FEIN, social security number, how many years in business, annual gross revenue, all that good stuff. And then we have this here where it kind of goes over how to do certain things within QuickBooks. This is one of my favorite features right here, though, because whenever you were trying to figure out what kind of subscription to sign your client up with, this kind of gives it a breakdown of what each subscription is capable of doing. So let's say, for instance, they need to track inventory. None of these track inventory except for the QuickBooks Online Plus. So whenever you're trying to recommend, figuring out what their needs are, and they say, oh, I need to track inventory, then you'll know you can't do anything lower than Online Plus. So you'd have to recommend Plus or Advanced to them. So this is just a really neat way to be able to figure out how to get your client set up on that subscription. And then right here is back to that same page. So we'll figure out how to create a new QuickBooks Online subscription. So I'm going to show you how to do that from your own QuickBooks page. So while you're in your own QuickBooks page, this is going to be what it looks like from your practice. You'll have all your clients listed down here. You're going to go up here and click Add Client. And then from here, you're going to be able to put in the business name, their email address, what they want to be displayed as. We're going to be able to select a subscription for them. We can choose if we want a ProAdvisor discount set up for them or a direct discount. ProAdvisor discount, you'll get 30% off discount of the subscription, but you as the actual bookkeeper will be billed for this, and then your client will pay you that bill subscription. So you're kind of the middleman, but they do get a discount. They get a discount as well for billing directly, but only for a year. So they get a 30% discount only for a year, but it's billed directly to them. So that's something that you could discuss if you want to do that. This shows kind of what the rates are with that. This shows what the rates are with that discount. And these basically just match everything that we just talked about, from the simple start to the advanced subscriptions. And then also choosing if they wanted to set up payroll, if they needed to get T-sheets set up, and then also if they needed to pay contractors. So you can select however many of these apply and then click Save, and then you'll be able to go ahead and create a new account for them. So then the next thing you would do is set up their information import list, set up payroll, connect their bank to their actual QuickBooks. So this is one of my clients. They actually haven't done anything with this company. They just started this QuickBooks subscription, but they haven't really done anything within this business because it's a business venture that they were looking into doing. But basically from here, if you go to banking, there's several ways to do this. For one, you can go ahead and link your bank. You can click Find Bank here, or you can go to banking. And then from banking, you can click Connect Account. And then basically you would search for the banking institution they work with. So whether that be Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, some other random one, you can look up that information, click it, and then you'll be required to input their user login and password. It might send them a code to their phone, but then that will automatically link their bank account into QuickBooks so that you can go ahead and start reviewing and categorizing transactions. That's mainly going to be the gist of it. Obviously, you can connect some apps if they have other apps. Connecting QuickBooks payments. We already talked about connecting bank feeds. And then I already showed you guys the little spreadsheet that I use to make sure that I understand how their expenses work. But these are just things that I usually like to do whenever I'm getting people set up and they don't have a QuickBooks or a bookkeeping software already set up. These are just some steps. This is for QuickBooks specifically, but you get kind of the idea. So I hope this helped. All right, everyone. Well, that pretty much does it for this video. I hope that y'all enjoyed it. If did, please give it a like, subscribe, and be sure to leave a comment of something that you would like to see in the future. And be on the lookout for another video I have coming out. It's going to be just a nice little quick one of your daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly tasks that you should be doing as a bookkeeper. So I hope that y'all enjoyed this again, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.